What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of SSPN Live. I'm Jude, that's Ethan, and as always, my guy, we're here to talk some San Antonio Spurs. And man, you went on vacation, Ethan, and the Twitter rumors just started going crazy, man. All you saw was Spurs on there. So, what are your thoughts on kind of just the timing of that when you were taking a little bit of a break?
I know, of course, right? Like I'm in Disney World, walking around and waiting in lines. But I was comforted by the Twitterverse having San Antonio Spurs all over my feed and rumors for all kinds of different trades, but mostly around Kevin Durant, right, being a guy that's likely to be moved, according to rumors, within the next couple of weeks, or at least by draft night. And the Spurs, seem to be his number one option. I don't know if we've yet confirmed or if Kevin himself has addressed that rumor, Jude. But based on what sources say, the Spurs are his preferred destination should he be traded. So,
Yeah, and just to clarify there, that was from Sam Amico from
mhm.
Bleacher Report. And that is a great lead in, Ethan, because, the title, as you guys can see in the thumbnail and everything, is Spurs KD trade incoming because of all of the talk surrounding that. And I've got a plethora of tweets that I'm about to bring up. But on top of that, Ethan, we also got this news today. Let me put this on the screen. Michael Scotto comes out and says, the Sixers have engaged with the Spurs about potentially trading up to the number 2 pick. And my first thought is, okay, maybe there's going to be a trade down with Ace Bailey, like we've talked about. I've seen some people on Twitter like, it's Joel Embiid. Who knows what it's going to be? But when I was thinking, okay, logically, trade down 1 pick, Ace Bailey, maybe that's the case. Then I see this same tweet today, or I don't know if it's today, but it's from recent, hours and days. Evan Sideri reported that the Pelicans are aggressively trying to trade up for Ace Bailey. So I'm like, okay, that's probably not what the Spurs are doing. So, anyways, when it comes to that, that was definitely kind of what's the word? A wrench thrown in the idea that we had when it came to KD. So let me stop jumping around all over the place. We'll get to that here in a second. But I did want to mention that just because of course, that dropping this morning. But this was all of the stuff that preceded that when it comes to KD. So this was also another tweet that came out from Evan Sideri within the past couple days. He reported that Jeremy Sohan and Devin Vassell are 2 potential players to watch in a Kevin Durant trade. And that comes from Gambo987. Y'all might see that and be like, that doesn't really sound, that credible if you just look at the Twitter name. But John Gambardero, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, he's been working for 30 years for one of Arizona and specifically Phoenix's top sports station, which is 98.7. And this is what he tweeted, I believe, yesterday. Unfortunately, here, let me take this off real quick. And we're going to get to y'all's comments here in a second. Or no, yeah, this was actually earlier today. This was this morning. But he also reported, as much as you guys can see on the screen, and I'll read here for podcast, he said, the vast majority of stuff you were reading on KD trades are not even close. This is that time of year when rumors slash speculation and some bad reporting go wild. Nothing moving on KD yet. It will happen, but it is not close. Now, he tweets that this morning, but then it comes out, Ethan, I sent you this just about an hour ago. On his radio show, he said that it could happen as early as next week. So that's a little bit of the background with KD, but just to kind of wrap that up. Oh, that's a Tyus Jones tweet. I got that for later. Okay, maybe I don't have. This is the tweet. Sorry, I had to click through all of them there, guys. This was from about a day ago. The Heat, Knicks, Rockets, and Spurs and Timberwolves make up the current trade market for Kevin Durant. So obviously there was the Sam Amico report and everything like that. So there's kind of my spiel on all of the information there, Ethan, just to give my take a little bit on the KD trade. Really, we've been talking about it since the Giannis trade kind of came up. I believe you even brought it up first when we were kind of talking about the Giannis trade, that, KD is just an option that would be way cheaper than Giannis and would also kind of fill a need for the Spurs as well. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here, Ethan. I'm not sure what's going to come over the next couple weeks, but just to talk about KD, I would be open to that. I would be willing to move some sort of package. And I know this has been thrown around a lot. Me and you have texted about this, of Devin Vassell, one of Harrison Barnes or Keldon Johnson to make the money work, and the 14th pick. And then maybe if we really need to throw some more second rounders in there, to make it work, we'll do that too. But I think you and I specifically would prefer that package of Harrison Barnes, Devin Vassell, and 14.
Yeah, if I had to include anything else, Jude, I would include maybe a protected first round pick in the next year or two. Maybe a Spurs pick if we really think Kevin's going to put us to that like contending range. But I'm a huge fan of Kevin Durant. It would be hilarious if we signed him at this point in his career, because Chris Paul was a guy I was a huge fan of, and we signed him at 39. And then Kevin Durant, he was my favorite player when I was 12, 13. 14, and then if we were to get him at 36, that would also be hilarious, because he's another guy that we were rumored to get way back in the day before he went to Golden State. Like, we had the idea of pairing him, LaMarcus, and Kawhi. So to get him now, I think it would be a dream come true for me personally, but I also think it fits. And if I'm being completely honest, it might fit a little better than even Giannis. And that might be a hot take, but I think KD's ability to space the floor, he can play the 3 or the 4. He can be a floor spacer. We've seen him play in a free-flowing offense in Golden State. We've seen him be an ISO scorer in pretty much every other stop. And at no point in his career has he really dropped off as an elite 3-level scorer and an efficient scorer. So I think if we can get it done for just Devin, Harrison, and maybe 1 or 2 first-round picks, I think you got to pull the trigger if I'm the Spurs. But if you have to throw in Jeremy Sohan, that's where I start to get a little more about whether or not I really want to do the trade.
Yeah, when I saw the Jeremy Sohan rumors, for me, man, and look, I understand there's a lot of people out there who maybe don't feel the same way that I do about Jeremy Sohan, but here's one thing I'll remind you, and y'all have probably seen this floating around Twitter if you've been on. He is younger than the Thompson twins and Brandon Miller, and he was in the draft before them. So that's like another thing when it comes to Jeremy, on top of all of the context of like him barely really playing power forward his entire career because of the circumstances of the Spurs.
Yep.
He is still very, very green. He's been 22 for like a month now, probably less than a month. So I just still believe in his long-term potential. I feel like he's only scratching the surface. I personally, I was talking to a friend about this the other night. This may sound crazy. I actually kind of have him on my personal untouchable list. Now, again, if there's an offer out there at the end of the day for some crazy superstar, that I might trade Jeremy Sohan, but I really would prefer to kind of keep him and see what he becomes, because again, and I've said this on other episodes, like 25 to 26-year-old Jeremy Sohan, I think can be a lot better than, the version we've seen in these first couple years, especially if he's playing his natural position with a better cast around him.
For sure. And not to beat a dead horse. First of all, I agree with you. He's on my personal untouchable list as well. I know that's looking through fanatical lenses.
Yeah, right.
We're big fans of everybody on the roster, but and not to beat a dead horse, but depth is so extremely important, and we've seen that in these playoffs and happening right now between Indiana and OKC in the finals. So a guy like Jeremy Sohan in 2 to 3 years could be an elite, just defensive menace for us. In a league that's really getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and Adam Silver continues to kick the can down the road on expansion, so it's only going to continue to get more and more competitive.
Yeah. And here's Mudez. I actually didn't even mean to pull this up, but this was what I was going to say. He said Sohan had a recent 3-point training video. He has the upside down smiley face, because you don't. You got to believe it, when you see it like on the actual court.
Sure.
You can see the shot looking better and it going in, in wide open gyms. But, hopefully that the change in his shot mechanics, can lead to more makes long term. But honestly, man, I think that, I know we've talked about that for years at length, but that's besides the point for me when it comes to Jeremy Sohan, especially with the people that we're bringing in and that are going to be surrounding him. Like, we're going to bring in better shooters. We're going to have guys that continue to become better shooters, like a Wemby or a Stephon Castle. Ideally, De'Aaron Fox, not having both of his fingers on his shooting hand broken. Not saying it's going to be a giant improvement, but, that can be some increase that helps his shot as well, on top of other guys that we have on the roster or potential people that we bring in. But again, to get back to Jeremy, the things that he does otherwise, and you talked about depth, especially for us in the front court, which is very low right now, that's another reason why it's just, for me, that I kind of want to hold on to him in the way that I do, is because of also like the way that the roster is built too. But obviously, if we were getting KD back, we would still be able to keep Harrison, and we would, if it was Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan in that trade. I don't want to do that. I don't agree with that. But I will say, if we in that event, we would still keep Harrison and Keldon and then add KD. So it's not like the front court would be completely desolate in that point. But still, again, that is dismissive of all the other things that we just talked about with Jeremy Sohan's long-term potential. On top of the fact that his personality is just so Spursy, man.
It is Spursy. And I think going back to Amico's tweet, if what Kevin Durant said is true, if that tweet is true about the Spurs being his preferred destination, maybe Harrison and Devin is just plenty, because the Phoenix Suns want to do him, a solid in his twilight years and allow him to play for the team that he wants to play for.
100%. We got about 41 of y'all in here. We truly appreciate it. Well, now up to 46. Thank you guys so much. We've had a lot of new subscribers recently, Ethan, and I feel like I haven't got the chance to kind of thank them for that.
Right.
So we appreciate y'all being here.
Thank
We're
you.
almost to 3,000 subscribers. That's crazy to think about for me and Ethan, who just kind of started this as two big Spurs fans back in 2021. So we really appreciate y'all. But one of the things I wanted to get to, Ethan, there was a comment from Trippy Cholo that happened, I think, before we got the stream started. And unfortunately, I can't pull it up in our studio here, but I'm going to read it from YouTube. He said, right now, there is a lot of smoke going around. We're trading back in the draft, or, supposedly trading back in the draft to Philadelphia and the KD trade rumors. We just got to let this play out and see what happens after the finals. And I just feel like that's a good mentality to kind of have on things, because we'll go through things more. But honestly, I'll kind of bury the lead here, Ethan. My takeaway with all this stuff going on as of recently, after I was like, oh, we're for sure going to just draft Dylan Harper at number 2, and then we get all the rumors we do today, is I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm not going to try to predict it. I do have a friend who has some sources that we'll get into a little bit later, but those sources don't really have anything to do with trades or anything like that. So I'm not going to sit here and try to predict what's going to happen. I mean, I guess what I would say, just to give a take on it, is I think in the Wemby era, it's more likely that we do something like this. But also, we've seen so many times where there's all these rumors surrounding the Spurs, and then they just don't end up coming true.
Yeah, I think that's the safe bet, Jude. The Vegas odds would be the Spurs do absolutely nothing. We take 2 and 14 and call it a day. And if we make a trade, it's like just like for Minnesota last year, we trade 14 for maybe 2 firsts down the road. But I'm gonna go out on a limb here, Jude. I think the Kevin Durant trade, just because of the sheer numbers and the consistency around Spurs being the number 1 team, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it happens just before the draft.
I think that's a very reasonable take for sure. And that's definitely where the most smoke has been. And let me get into some of the other things that I had here. Well, you know what? I think I pretty much showed them all at this point. But just a little bit to get back to that number 2 pick, there was a little bit more context that did come out. Paul Garcia reported that Jake Fisher, who I actually believe he covers the Pelicans, but he has a good bit of NBA sources. I could be wrong on that. Actually, no, that's Jake Madison. My bad. He covers the Pelicans. But Jake Fisher, I believe he's just an overall NBA guy, confirms Michael Scotto's reporting that the Sixers have had conversations with the Spurs about trading for the 2nd pick. Fisher still thinks it's a long shot the Spurs move the pick, but perhaps the 3 guards together is enough to entertain the idea.
That I think is far less likely. I don't think the Spurs are going to trade down. I just don't think it's happening. Historically, we really haven't done that as far as I can remember. We've traded up once for Kawhi, right? Other than that, have we really ever moved picks other than delaying them like we did last year with Minnesota?
Not off the top of my head that I can remember, because in the Malachi, Jeremy, and Blake draft, we used all of those, right?
Correct. And then we delayed with Minnesota with Rob Dillingham.
Mm-hmm. And with Castle. I feel like I'm forgetting a year in there.
I'm looking at them all right now, and okay. I don't think any of these were trade downs or ups.
Okay.
If that's a proper way to say it.
We got some people in the comments, I think, giving us a little bit of news. I have been getting off work for the past hour or two. So I see Jay in the comments and he says, just saw an hour ago that New Orleans also called the Spurs about the second pick. And Jay, shout out to you being in here, man. He says, new reports now say Pelicans want to swap picks with the Spurs, and the Pelicans GM, old boy from the Pistons, Joe Dumars, right? That's his name.
Yep.
Said, what is it going to take to move up to number 2? We could get Trey Murphy. Now, that was something we talked about a little bit earlier. And if the Pelicans are just sold on Dylan Harper, I don't know. If they want to give us Trey Murphy and Herb, if they're saying, what will it take? And then they're willing to, give us some crazy offer, then I don't know. I might be willing to do that. But again, Ethan, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at all this and I'm like, yeah, but what if we do that? And then Dylan Harper is just this all NBA guy that everybody thinks he's going to be. I don't know. I don't know what to do. How about that? That's my take.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to curse Dylan Harper to a career in New Orleans.
Okay. So speaking of that, I mentioned earlier that I have some friends with sources. I will leave it at that. Okay. Let me go ahead and find this in my vault here. But I got some takes from some good scouting people, Ethan.
Okay. That's more context than Shams has ever given in his life, so I trust this.
But okay, let me see. I know I'm trying to find it here. Dang it. Okay. Well, here, let me tell you one thing. This wasn't the one that I was just talking about, but I'm on this is another guy who is very high up in one of the main sports organizations. Again, I know that's not a bunch of context, but he said this. He said, and I'm not taking this for that much of I'm taking this with a grain of salt, but he says the Spurs might shop Castle. He says his value's really high right now since he won Rookie of the Year, and I don't think they'll keep him and Fox together, or him, Fox, and Harper together. Now, with that being said, my friend who sent this said he has a really hard time believing that, and that's partially the reason he doesn't go to this guy for a lot of draft info. But I did just want, to say that. But the other one that I was talking about, let me find it here. Sorry to hold you guys kind of hostage here. Okay. Dang it. Now my thing is glitching. I'm sorry about this.
Come on, Jude.
Dude, it keeps scrolling back up here. Okay. I'm going to dish a question to you, Ethan, while I go find this. How about this? For the meantime, what are your thoughts on Wemby becoming a Shaolin monk?
It's just completely on brand, right? For Wemby, he just tends to do these deep thinking, very sort of bizarre, I guess, side quests. But ultimately, I think it will benefit him. And if I'm the rest of the NBA, I'm terrified. This guy's finding his inner self, is finding his zen. He's out on a retreat when most people are just enjoying their summertime, while he's continuing to work out. I don't know if you saw this morning, they have a clip of him running. He's been doing that every single morning at the Temple, and he's bald, which is to emulate, some of the great Spurs, including Tim Duncan, I guess. So I am terrified if I'm the rest of the NBA, and I'm extremely excited for him to find zen and balance, Jude, as he continues to work on his post game.
I mean, man, we've talked about his mentality kind of since he's been in the league. And I just think that the biggest takeaway that I had was that wasn't planned. It was he was just touring through China. You saw the video of the Great Wall. And then apparently his whole camp left and he's like, nah, I'm staying here. I'm doing a retreat for 10 days. And
That's awesome.
He's going full, energy channeling. And I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm with it as well.
Okay, so I got a quote from Zach Lowe here. I'm still looking a little bit for what I'm trying to find, but this is interesting. And give me your thoughts on this, Ethan. The biggest mystery in the league right now is how aggressive are the Spurs going to get? I think that's code for they're going to start with number 2, no Castle and no Vassell, and negotiate from there. So again, that's why I'm like, I don't know what's happening, because you've got some people saying that Devin Vassell is 100% involved, and then you've got Zach Lowe coming out, who's a pretty reputable guy, you know what I mean, saying that Castle's not Castle, excuse me. Well, he did mention Castle, but he's saying Vassell is somebody that we're kind of keeping off the table.
I don't think I buy that, Jude.
Okay.
I think he is a trusted guy, but I think that's a guy that doesn't really know the Spurs. Talking about the Spurs.
That is a fair point for sure. Okay. Well, I can't find this crap.
I can't tell if Robert Ball's making fun of you or if he's being genuine. Oh, he's making fun of you. He's teasing you.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
gotcha. Well, that was kind of something that just came up a little bit in my head there, so apologies for that. Just trying to do our best here. But another thing that kind of came out that was a little bit exciting is the Fiesta jerseys apparently may be returning next season, and I've kind of always wanted to see Wemby in one of those from the 2021 season, and I also think that may give us some logo inspiration as well.
Yeah, we can maybe just bring back one of the old ones, Jude. What do you say? Nobody remembers that anyway. That might have been back when we had 300 subscribers.
There you go. There you go.
I think those are my second favorite Fiestas, the black ones with the stripes. I think the white ones are still my all-time favorites. They're basically the same jersey, just white. But yeah, I'm all for it, dude. Bring it back. Bring on the culture.
100%. Want to get to some of the comments that we missed. So Jay, he's kind of harping on how, I think he's referring to the Pelicans here, how they want Ace Bailey. Again, I'm not exactly sure, how that would work unless there's maybe like a 3-team trade going on there. Alex7173 says, I agree that the Spurs of old, where there is smoke, there is nothing. The Spurs of now, smoke about CP3, we got him. Smoke about veteran wing Harrison Barnes. Smoke about Fox, we got him. So, and that's a really good point whenever it came to your KD trade there, Ethan, and the point that you were making about that. So again, kind of another thing that I want to pull up here, Ethan, and we can kind of talk about this. So when we look at the bottom roster here, and we'll just say for the sake of conversation, it's Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, and 14 for Kevin Durant. Where do you see him sliding in at the 3 position? Do you see him playing the 4 and us moving Julian up to the starting 3 like we did at times this year, and then moving Jeremy Sohan to the bench 4? What are your kind of thoughts on lineups if this Kevin Durant trade does come through?
Dang. Man, if it's Ethan making the decisions, I think I play KD at the starting 3 with Jeremy at the 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And the thing is, it kind of sucks because I feel, like I said, we could move Julian to the starting lineup and then you could kind of shore up the front court a little bit more. But I still just think by far the best fit would be KD at the 3, which then kind of leaves us with some more questions for that front court. Obviously, we would address that in free agency, I'm sure. And, we do still have the 39th pick, or excuse me, the 38th pick. And we have all those second rounders that we could potentially trade up for somebody like a Maxime Reynaud, which has been rumored about.
That would be crazy. I don't know if they would, well, maybe they'd take 5 second round picks for like a 25th pick. I don't know.
Alrighty, so you guys see as well that we do have some prospect breakdowns for you guys today on the docket too. So the 2 guys that we're going to be talking about today are Cedric Coward and Collin Murray-Boyles. So let me go ahead and pull up Cedric Coward's ESPN profile. We've been getting a lot of comments about him over the past couple of weeks, and you guys might have seen that he's like one of the biggest risers kind of late in the draft process, and especially post-combine. And when you kind of hear about him and you see his physique and his numbers and stuff, you can definitely see the appeal. But the thing that I didn't realize, like after watching his highlights and everything like that, I went to look at his profile, which we're about to pull up here. And as you guys can see, well, here, let me go ahead and get us to the right thing here. You can see his games played, Ethan. Mm-hmm. Only played 6 games this year. So I'll go ahead and pull up his entire game log for this season that was due to injury. So obviously some 30-point games here, against Northern Colorado, a 22-point game with 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 stocks against Eastern Washington. That was his old team where he transferred from. He's a senior, Ethan, but he is only 21, so he's a little bit younger, but kind of in a Derek White-esque way. He worked his way up from a D3 to Eastern Washington, and then all the way to Washington State this year. And actually, he had an offer from Duke. If he would have gone back to college, he would have transferred to Duke and played with them this year. But he did so well at the combine, and his stock rose so much. This is, again, a part of the sources I was trying to find earlier, that he ended up entering the draft. But you also see, Ethan, the best team that he played, when you look at these 6 games, is by far Iowa. And that was one of his, not a great game from. Did have 8 boards in that game, but that's really kind of the main bright spot in that one. Did not shoot that well. He's kind of known as a 3-point shooter, a career 40% guy. Went 1 for 6 in that game, and also had a little bit of a dud against Idaho as well. You see the good games against Bradley and Portland State. But I think if there's anything that you want to kind of question about Cedric Coward, it could be the small sample size as well as level of competition. And again, Washington State did play in the West Coast Conference this year. It wasn't the Pac-12, but again, he didn't get to go up against Gonzaga because he got injured before conference play. But with all of that being said, Ethan, a lot of people around the league are very high on him because of what he's done at the combine over the past 2 years. And obviously, his statistics, aren't, horrible or anything like that, as much as it's a small sample size. And I wanted to pull up, kind of last year as well. He did average 15 points per game on 38% shooting, throughout a full season with 6 boards as well. But again, that was at Eastern Washington. We see guys from smaller colleges, kind of around the league sometimes come out and, make a big play, or make a big splash in the league. But when I look at Cedric Coward, as much as there's a lot of appeal when it comes to, his shooting ability, he also has the biggest hands in the draft. He's actually drawn Kawhi comparisons because of that. Because of the injury history, through no fault of his own with the way that it went this season. And as you can see, only played 1 game at D3 Willamette as well. I'm just not sure if I want to take a swing here at 14 on him, just to be blunt.
How is he defensively, Jude?
So there's a little bit of questions there. I would say I would just put him at about average with some potential, but also it could maybe not work out too. I would say the most sure thing about Cedric Coward is he is a really good 3-point shooter.
I do like that. I don't know if I want to use 14 for it.
Exactly.
At 14, I feel like we can find... I'm looking for defense first and foremost, I think, at 14, or size. And I mean, as much as I feel like we can find a phenomenal 3-point shooter in the second round.
Well, Ethan, I finally have found it.
Let's go.
So, again, I will say this person works at no ceilings. That's what I will say about that. He brought up Coward as an option at 14. And he said he's been following since he was a sophomore, averaging 7 points per game. Coward went through the draft process last year and was killing everybody in pre-draft workouts. His team sources have him say that a lot of teams around the league have him as a top 25 guy, and they've had him as a top 25 guy all year. Again, that probably stems back to the combine last year. Listen to this, though. He went to the combine and measured in with a 7'2" wingspan. This is what he had to say about it. The fail rate for wings who have arms that long is basically 0. Says he's an extremely high character guy and actually views him as one of the safer picks in this year's class.
Wow.
Which is crazy to think about when you just look at the numbers and kind of, just try to, I guess, come at it, from that perspective.
I mean, the numbers are really solid. I don't know. I guess I'm just nervous because it's not the typical lottery pick guy. And to be honest, it's the first time I've heard his name.
Yeah. But there's some people, I think Kevin O'Connor has him ranked as the 5th best guy in the draft. Most people do not have him that high, but he is kind of usually in, the teens when it comes to just where he's ranked.
Interesting.
And no worries at all, Robert. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for being in here. And then Jay says, thoughts on Don Harris reporting that we're taking Harper and not trading.
I did see that.
I don't know. Here's one thing I will say. I feel like there's been some times where Don Harris tweets some stuff, and I know he's very involved and he has more sources and info and has been covering the Spurs longer than I ever have. You know what I mean? But I feel like there's some times where he tweets some stuff. Like I remember during the DeJounte situation, where just sometimes it's not exactly what happens long term. But you could say that with Zach Lowe earlier. So, okay, sorry. I also completely misread that. I thought he said we were taking Harper and trading him. Okay, I could completely see that. But I do stand by what I said about Don Harris. But on that one, I could see that. Again, Ethan, I hate to be like, I don't know anymore, but I think we're going to keep 2 for sure. And then maybe 14's in the KD trade.
That's my prediction as well.
Yeah. But any other thoughts on Cedric Coward here, Ethan?
No, sir. I feel like this one's going to bite me in the butt, though, because he does have like attributes that scream steal the draft. The wingspan, the shooting, the build, the rebounding. Like, I feel like 5 years from now, this could be one of those names. It's like, dang, we really could have had him at 14, but we traded it for KD and we got to the second round. You know what I mean? Like I don't want that to be the reality. But it does spook me a little. And I'm not sure that this is the guy we take at 14.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say on Cedric Coward, with all of the question marks around him, there's got to be a reason Duke wanted him.
Very true. I mean, he could be just the greatest team player of all time. I saw one of the comparisons, like you said, was Derek White. And so, like, if that's his long-term projection, that's a really, really solid pick. But we picked Derek at 29. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
7'2" wingspan and the biggest hands in the draft as well. So there's definitely a lot of measurables there for Cedric Coward. But like I said, I think there's just a lot of other guys that I would feel better with going with. But again, Ethan, if for some reason we end up keeping the 14th pick and we end up going with him, I'll be like, okay, they're buying into, what all these other people were buying into when it came to him, just in the combine the past 2 years.
Right.
So the next guy, though, that we have here, Ethan, somebody who is also kind of in that teens range. No Ceilings actually has him exactly at 14 on their big board, and that is Collin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. Now, the biggest thing with him that you could say is not the greatest shooter. The way that I would kind of describe him, Ethan, is, still kind of a modern 4 in the sense that he can put the ball on the floor. He's got some passing ability, but definitely, a physical kind of around the basket guy. Kind of like an Isaiah Stewart is something that I would kind of think about. Obviously, he's much higher than, I can't remember, honestly, off the top of my head where Isaiah Stewart was drafted. But, Collin Murray-Boyles has consistently been in the lottery. I just used Isaiah Stewart as kind of an example of someone who's around 6'8". Some people might look at him as more of like a center skill set, without the shooting. But I think in today's NBA, Ethan, especially with a lot of, stretch fives and just shooting becoming more of a thing for centers. Like if you could pair him next, this is totally hypothetical and we'll have to see if this even happens, but, if it does happen. If you were to pair him next to Maxime Reynaud, like I think that would be a very complementary skill set, because with Reynaud, some of the questions might be, okay, well, he's not as physical as you'd like him to be, but he has, the 7-foot frame and the shooting ability, right? Collin Murray-Boyles, 6'7", almost 250 pounds. Yeah, may not have the shooting ability for a 4 that you would like, but can still put the ball on the floor, is switchable on defense, averages 8 rebounds a game, was South Carolina's best player by far. They had a really rough season, and he was basically, the guy who was keeping them in games and was a big reason that they were even able to win games. You see the Arkansas game down there, man. And that was a blowout, obviously. You see all the others are losses, but had 35-7 in that game. So in the few wins that South Carolina did had, he had a lot to do with it. So I guess for me, when it comes to Collin Murray-Boyles, Ethan, the appeal is just, again, somebody who, I honestly think, Ethan, this may sound crazy. I think he could come in immediately and do what Bismack did last year. But I do see him as more of a 4, and he shot like 29% from 3. But it's actually 26%, as you can see right there. I thought I saw that somewhere else. But it's not, if you leave him open, it's not like it's completely screwed. Like I saw on his highlights, multiple, made open threes. But again, it's not something that comes naturally to him. But when it comes to the Spurs front court and us just needing size and rebounding, I do see the appeal for him. But again, the thing with him is if we're going to have him at the 4, we probably need a 5 who's going to be able to shoot.
Yeah, the shooting thing is obviously going to be the biggest negative. I would say if the choice at 14 is between Collin Murray-Boyles and Rasheer Fleming, I think I take Rasheer Fleming 9 out of 10 times. But I am a huge fan of his defensive versatility and his physical play and build. Like that's always like been a soft spot for me in terms of archetype players. But I just think Rasheer Fleming pretty much gives you everything that Collin does, but also is a better shooter and a more fluid player. Yeah.
I was looking at some of the comments here. We got some other people saying that Carter Bryant, if he's not at 14, they'd want Coward. Mudyez also says that Cedric Coward gives him some Cody Williams vibes as well. And then Dillamay Dukes 21 says, I want Sorber at 14, which I can definitely see all of those as well, and see the arguments for them. Honestly, these were just 2 other names that I kind of saw floating around, in that kind of range where the Spurs are at. And maybe we trade this pick and none of this matters. But at this point, Ethan, while that's not the case as of right now, wanted to just kind of go over these guys in the event that maybe we do pick them up.
For sure.
But with that being said, we got Aaron Jefferson in the house. He says the Spurs are minus 125 on DraftKings to trade for KD. So, again, that ties into some of the stuff that you were saying earlier, Ethan. Okay, well, some other things that I have on Cedric Coward that I forgot to say. He does shoot 71% at the rim. So whenever he does drive to the basket, he's able, and that's over his entire career. That's not just the last season, as well as, like I said, 40% from 3 for most of his career. And even though he's a senior, he's going to be 21. And like, for example, Derek White, he was 23, when we drafted him at 29. So as much as he's an experienced player, he's a little bit young for his grade. So there's that upside as well.
Good point.
The last question I have for you, Ethan, and again, this is kind of outdated, but I have seen it over the past couple weeks and had it down on the docket, is there was a little bit of smoke floating around that the Spurs might be interested in trading up for Khaman Murray-Boyles, or that they were at least very interested in Khaman Murray-Boyles. And maybe if this second trade, this second pick gets traded, maybe he's the person that we're trading down for. Again, there's so many things to juggle with all of the rumors floating around, but I know we've talked about them before, but what are your thoughts on, that potential scenario if it were to occur?
Man, that would be pretty crazy. I mean, Khaman Murray-Boyles is kind of the guy that we wanted at the very beginning, right? When we were talking about drafting at 8 or 9, like that was the guy we were praying to God would fall to us at that spot. So it's a pretty good consolation prize. I think honestly, the only way we would do it is if that New Orleans trade rumor has any validity to it, we fleece them for one, if not both, of Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. Get the 7th pick, draft Khaman there, then trade 14 for Kevin Durant. So now we have 3 more wings that can play 3-4, defense, length, shooting. We have it all, and a rim protector in Khaman Murray-Boyles. So in that sense, if that were to happen, I think I'd be pretty darn happy, Jude. As much as I really, really want Harper, and I think he has all-star potential and will be fantastic down the line as a point guard, it's hard to argue with that point if we can get that much depth and that much scoring and rim protection all in the same night.
Yeah, if we can get, what Joe Dumars said, whatever it's going to take for the second pick from New Orleans, and that includes, like you said, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones on top of maybe some draft capital and stuff like that, and then we're still able to make the KD trade happen with 14, that would be a scenario, where I'd be down with number 2. And obviously, like you said, if we're getting one of their picks in there and getting Mal Watch as well, that would be a pipe dream. But I guess what I would say there, I feel like the likelihood for that is probably decreased with all these other rumors. But I've been a fan of Khaman since this has started. And here's the other thing, man. Like, I saw some people saying today, when the Sixers rumors came out that like, oh, it's Embiid and Wemby. Like, what that still doesn't solve, Ethan? You know what that still wouldn't solve? Do you know the answer?
What? Go ahead.
We still wouldn't have a backup center.
True. Actually,
you know what I'm saying? Like I just, that's all I want. That's all I want this offseason, honestly.
We wouldn't even have a starting center because he doesn't play during the regular season or postseason, Jude. Joel Embiid is who I'm talking about.
There you go. Right. Yeah. And that's the other thing about that one too. Like, anyways, when I saw that this morning through my brain, I was like, if this is Joel Embiid or God forbid Paul George, like I'm gonna act. Then I'll come on here and like criticize the Spurs front office.
Yeah, the Philly one never shouldn't be a thing.
Embiid, that's a little different. As much as I agree with what you said about the injuries, but specifically Paul George, I would come on and criticize at that point. Like at that point, I would be like, definitely go for KD.
There's only 2 people on Philly that I would actually want. One's Jared McCain, and the other is Gershon Yabusele. And that's pretty much a joke.
Not even Tyrese? Well, that's not going to happen.
Not really.
Yeah.
I don't want another ball dominant point guard.
Well, that wouldn't fit. That's sure.
Making that much money. I'll take Jared McCain on his rookie deal that can play off guard. That'd be nice.
Yeah, he could even be the backup point guard too.
He could. He has got ball handling skill for sure.
I like what Robert Ball says. He says the future is bright if we don't screw it up and overpay for someone.
Agreed, Robert.
Minato Slays says, hey guys, nobody's talking about Malik Beasley being a free agent. He's a legit sniper. You did mention that, didn't you?
3 videos ago. This guy's not watching every video. We're like a Disney Plus show. You have to watch every single episode of our Marvel series. That's crap. If you want to understand the movie.
But yeah, no, I would definitely be willing to bring in Malik Beasley as an off-ball shooter. And I'm glad that he brought that up because there were some other screenshots that I forgot to get to, Ethan. And they're of potential free agents. And obviously, this is going to have to depend on how things play out. But in a world where we do trade the second pick, don't think that's going to happen. But just for the sake of conversation, I saw this today. After a disappointing season with the Suns, Tyus Jones will likely need to settle for another prove-it deal on a veteran's minimum.
I'll take it.
I would want to, if we do trade the second pick, I would 100% be down to bring in Tyus Jones as the backup point guard. It's not like he doesn't have a brother to call up and ask about how things are run down here.
It's funny. I was thinking about that very thing last night when I couldn't go to sleep. I was like, man, Tyus Jones, like if he could be like the throw-in, I thought he was under contract still, so forgive my ignorance. I was like, if he could be a throw-in inclusion with the Phoenix to get the KD trade, like absolutely I would take him. But if he's a free agent, bring him on. Are you kidding me? Especially if we don't draft Mr. Dylan Harper. Yeah.
The other one that I had, Ethan, Steven Adams will likely command offers at a mid-level exception figure in unrestricted free agency. The Rockets want to re-sign him, but plenty of interest from contending teams. Talk about a backup center, Ethan. We've talked about him before. I think somebody came in here and said we need Aquaman, and then that reminded me of the quotes where he just loved the smell of Greg Popovich's hair. Y'all look it up. And I would love to have Steven Adams as the backup center. That would be like a way better Bismack.
Agreed. I've been another guy that we're getting late in his career, but if we had gotten in 2015, I would be through the roof. But regardless, he does solve a lot of problems at that backup center position, primarily rebounding, setting great screens, and just being a physical presence. I'm pretty sure he can still do that even this late in his career.
Yeah, 100%. Paisan, want to give a shout out to you, man. He said, let's smash the like button, guys. I saw some of y'all were talking about that later. We really appreciate y'all. Recognize Life says Riley Mini Shooter. I think he's talking about Riley Minix. People were talking about him earlier. And let's see what ML Miles has to say. He says, do you guys think the days of getting productive call-ups from the G League are over? Can
Ooh.
anyone on the Austin Spurs make it to the main squad? And that's probably why they were talking a little bit about our boy Riley Minix there.
Riley Minix is the next one, I think. I think he has the best chance, Jude. And you're the Austin Spur expert, so I'll let you take this question.
Well, what do you think about Harrison Ingram?
I do like Harrison Ingram. I think he's a little further away, if I'm being honest.
I agree. I think with the little stretch we saw from Riley, as well as the fact that he could, play you could argue, he's kind of like Julian in a sense, where he can play 2 through 4, kind of because his shooting ability and his height, as much as he's definitely more of a small ball forward, just because he's really more of a wing. That's what I would say is somebody to look at. And it seems like David Duke Jr. is going to probably be gone after this year. So shout out to him for what he did for Austin. They had a really good year this year. I think they I forget when they ended up losing in the playoffs, but they made the G League playoffs. Him and Malachi Flynn were going off. But I think those guys, kind of being on the team, and they're a little bit older, that is kind of telling of, it's definitely going to be a lot less. We're not going to see the Mamus and the Julian Champagnes and, even back in the day, we were seeing Malachi and Blake kind of go up and down and then get like significant minutes. Obviously, that was the 2021-2022 season, but I definitely think that won't be happening as much.
Me neither. In terms of guys like a Danny Green that can come from Austin and make an impactful, be an impactful presence, I think Julian's just the guy for at least the next 2 to 3 years. You think he's the only one?
Yeah. July 26th says, would Harper come off the bench? I think this season he would come off the bench, and then long term, probably we'd either move off of one of the 3 of Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Dylan Harper, or somehow it would work long term with playing all 3 of them together, and Stephon Castle would be a permanent 3.
I would agree with that for sure.
Okay, the last thing that I want to say here, I was kind of seeing this in the comments as well, Ethan, is when it comes to KD and just his personality and kind of how he's butted heads with coaches, and he hasn't really lasted long in certain places other than like OKC at the beginning of his career. A lot of people were asking, is Mitch Johnson going to be able to handle that? Is that going to cause other problems? I think the first thing I would say is, there's a chance he's only here 2 years in the first place because he's only got 1 more year left on his deal and then another $50 million player option. And I'm sure that, those 2 years would for sure happen. I saw some other people saying they think if we get him, we're definitely going to sign him to an extension. But, I do see the appeal there, but there is a chance, before that happens, as of right now, there could be a chance that we just get him for 2 years. And that's honestly kind of what I would prefer to do. Not to say that I don't want, like, if he's like, okay, I got to sign an extension to come, again, at least it's going to be cheaper than Giannis, but I would kind of prefer to just ride out these next 2 years, get the most out of him in kind of these final years of his prime. And then that allows us to still kind of, save our draft capital and give us, cap flexibility for, extensions that we need to sign for, potentially a Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, Jeremy Sohan, Victor Wembanyama.
Nothing to add, my friend. I will say if Kevin is worried about the fan base not accepting him, all I'll say is, Kevin, I have a lot of old 7th grade t-shirts that I will bring out of the closet and wear on this podcast if you decide to be kind to Mitch Johnson and the Spurs team and play for us and not cause any drama.
So just to answer this question, you're not really too worried about about Mitch Johnson and KD. Okay, yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. I honestly, here's what I'll say. I see the questions, and that's why I brought it up. Like, I see what y'all are saying because of the track record. And I guess this just turns into where I put on Spurs colored glasses. But like, when was the last time I guess Kawhi, that was the last time the Spurs really had drama. You could kind of say DeJounte, but I don't really think that's the case, especially with him still showing up to Pop's retirement. So I just feel like, they'd let KD be KD, and there's probably a reason he wants to come here too. But I guess what I'll say to that is I think there is a percentage chance that maybe there's some, I don't know. I was going to say disgruntlement, but even then, I feel like that'll probably just be sorted out in house. Like, you're playing with prime Victor Wembanyama. Like, what are you going to be that mad about? You
I
know?
also don't think, maybe this is just me being a Kevin Durant stan. I don't think he's ever really been the primary source for any disgruntlement on the team. In Brooklyn, I think it was very obviously Kyrie Irving that got Steve Nash fired, and that was, the source
Yeah.
of drama. And then it was also James Harden who demanded a trade to Philly, halfway through the season. Um, and then in OKC, Russ was the biggest voice, and then in Phoenix, I think that was genuinely the coach's fault plus Bradley Beal, if I'm being completely honest. And
Yeah.
now he's just like, okay, I want out. And he has the right to say that. He's got 2 rings. He's not pleased with where Phoenix is, and it clearly did not work, and they're in cap hell. So I don't think he's a team blower upper, if I'm being completely honest. I think he's been dealt a couple bad hands. And he's a legend of the game. So I want him on the team.
I think that's a very fair take. And, I feel like we get caught up in these last couple years and we forget about the OKC and the Warriors run. And I get the Warriors were stacked and everything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, we talked about it. There's one team that was able to get up a lot on them. So it
Yep.
wasn't like maybe they were potentially invincible, but still, man, like those runs, like they got to count for something. Like, yes, he did have really good supporting casts, but, it's not like, yes, he eventually won it out of Oklahoma City. And that was signing. That wasn't even a trade. He just left
Correct.
in free agency. Yeah, and then he won 2 championships with the Warriors. So it's not like that ruined things. Obviously, he
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to go back this year, but again, eventually, it ran its course and it was what it was. So I hear you for sure. I do want to bring this up. Wemby's Castle. We haven't seen you in here for a long time, man. Good to see you. He says, I promise y'all are going to like the KD deal. You will also love the return package we get from trading for number 2. So maybe he knows something, Ethan. He knows something.
Well, he is Wemby and Castle, so he would have an ear to the ground and that sort of thing, I guess.
There you go. There you go. James Pledger, he says, I feel the foundation you build around is here, but the depth and pieces to round out the roster are missing.
I agree.
Like that. Well, you know what I agree with, Ethan?
What's that?
This being a solid show and us being optimistic about the Spurs' future, regardless of what they do, because of all the options that the Spurs have. So we appreciate you guys being in here. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button below if you enjoyed the content. If you want to stay updated with everything, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. Turn that notification bell on, all that good stuff. Stay tuned to our posts on the community tab and everything like that on YouTube. We appreciate y'all. Y'all have a great weekend, and we will see y'all next week to talk more draft. And maybe next time we see you, there will be a big trade that's happened. Go Spurs, go.